What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Just want to make y'all a quick video. It's been a while, but thank you guys for your patience. And for you people who are new, I do want to say welcome. This is a great place for us to talk. We talk about a lot of different things when it comes to becoming a man. And guys, I'm going to be straight up with you. I'm still learning a lot as I go on, but I see on YouTube there are a lot of people who are a lot older than myself, in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, who are making a lot of videos about what it is to be a man and become a man. But I'm going to be honest with you. There's only so much I think you can gain from that age group. And I'm not saying you shouldn't watch those people, but I'm saying that they are further detached from what it is to be a man going through his later 20s. You see, a lot of people will automatically assume that you don't know what you're talking about if you're in your late 20s, that you haven't lived enough life. We have this very weird idea these days about being a man and what that looks like. You have a lot of people saying that, oh, you don't really become a man until you're 30. You don't really become a man until you're 40. Well, really, you don't actually become a man until you're 50. And people use a lot of different metrics, like how much money you make, how much wisdom you might have, how much women you might have dated, all these things, right? And I want to be honest with you guys. It's not true. I truly believe you become a man when you choose to become a man. Some people grow up much faster in life. Maybe that's because of their life experiences. Maybe they were abandoned as a child. Maybe they had to fight for themselves. Maybe they had a traumatic environment. Maybe they were an orphan. Maybe they were bouncing around between foster homes. Maybe they were homeless. Maybe they decided to join the military when they were really young and were sent off to war really quickly. And they quickly had to mature, and they quickly had to embrace survival instincts and what it means to be a man. And guys, I'm going to be honest with you. While we're on this subject, I think one of the most important things you can do as a man, if you're watching this video, is to embrace pain. You have to learn to embrace pain and chase it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to become a masochist and start cutting yourself and start just doing everything you can to cause as much pain yourself as possible. That's really ridiculous. But you have to choose your flavor of pain. And everybody has a different threshold, everybody has a different tolerance for pain. So if you're watching this today and you're one of the people I mentioned before about what it means, to grow up in a traumatic environment, to grow up in a place where you didn't have a whole lot of hope, maybe you had to fight for yourself, you probably learned this early on, and you probably have a high tolerance for pain. You probably have a high tolerance for stress. And this is a good thing. There's a flip side to everything, guys, right? These days you have a lot of people saying, oh, you need to have a very good nurturing family, that you need to have a peaceful family, right? You have to be very, very careful the way you show discipline to your children and all this stuff, right? All this modern think. And the issue with a lot of modern think is it's going in the complete opposite direction, that the way the world has been working for hundreds, thousands of years. So what I would recommend if you are a man, because ultimately I believe every man, most men, let me back up, most men are going to want to have a family. Now, if you're one of those guys that, if you consider yourself, MGTOW or Black Pill or something, you can click off this video. But if you have any desire to be a family man, a father, to have children, to have a good wife, to raise a family and really a legacy, right? Just to add to this, to add to future generations, right? Especially if you fear God, if you trust God, if you believe that God has a purpose and a plan for spreading righteousness throughout the earth, right? It starts with the family. And a lot of guys don't realize this. A lot of guys, when I grew up, I grew up in this life of, the Disney blue pill experience, right? That's the best way I know how to put it. I grew up, most media, most music, most everything was about a woman's feelings and how a man should burden himself and he should just take on as much, pain and suffering for her as possible. And you should always, basically kneel to her emotions and what she wants, and happy wife, happy life. And I believe this really got big, and I think it came to a head about 5 or 10 years ago. I think recently a lot of guys are waking up to this, and you're seeing guys go the complete other direction, which is something I've talked about in my other videos. But I grew up in this environment where, it was all about just do your best in life, do what other people say, don't ruffle too many feathers, don't be a problem, right? And there's a good side to this, right? You don't want to become, a full out thug and like be thrown in jail or prison for the rest of your life. But there is something to say about always being, a sheep, always being, whipped by society into falling into place and following the maze and falling into the system. And a lot of people, you tell them this, they're not going to understand, they're not going to take it seriously. But when your whole life revolved around women and women's feelings, you can imagine, right? And I grew up with this mindset for many years. You can imagine how much like heartbreak that men go through. You can imagine how much confusion men have. You can imagine the frustration that even you might have thinking about these things, right? And it's something that I've realized more as time goes on, but I'm really realizing it as I get closer to 30, is to be the person you want to be. Every man has this idea of who he wants to be, right? I always admired the character of Bruce Wayne, right? Batman, right? I was a huge Batman fanatic when I was in my teenage years and even my early 20s. And it wasn't so much the superhero itself, it was what, the character, the icon Batman stood for, right? Justice and strength and being able to look after others and always pushing yourself to be better and better and always fighting against the chaos, right? Not so much of a white knight mentality as it is this, anybody can come from basically anything. Yes, money helps, don't get me wrong, but you can come from pretty much anything and make something of yourself if you choose to, right? And I think a lot of people need to embrace the Batman mentality. A lot of men need to, and you guys might think this is hilarious, but if you invite pain and suffering into your life, you're going to grow. What I think a lot of parents mess up on, especially for raising boys and young men, is they want to protect them, especially if, maybe a father raised them that used to live a very crazy life, and, he lived a wild life and a very, what you call dangerous life, and he wants his sons to not be that way, right? Maybe he's afraid of them being in jail or, of what society might do. And so they go the complete other direction and they shelter them, right? They don't let them play sports because, you could have a concussion and be, bedridden for the rest of your life, or you could break your leg and never be able to run again. You could, there's other things, like other parents out there, they don't want their kids to join the military because, they're going to get, killed in war and stuff like that. But you have to let especially sons, you really have to let them experience pain. And the more pain and the more pressure and the more refining they do at a younger age, the better. I still am figuring things out as I go on. But if I'm being honest, I look at a lot of my peers, I look at a lot of guys my age, even older, and they don't know what they're doing in life. Completely aloof, completely just, they don't have any goal, any mission, any desire to go past, base level. And what I call base level, guys, again, is this, base mentality of just, most people run off of a mindset of, life is all about, working the 9 to 5 and keeping up with the latest sports teams and making sure I'm going to, a vacation once a year and enjoying my concerts. And I think for a majority of people, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. On the flip side, I see a lot of these people are extremely unhappy, they're unhealthy because they're constantly coping through various negative methods, like a ton of junk food, no exercise. You get home from work and you're constantly loading your life up with stress. People have to load up their, weekdays with a bunch of different things. I got to take the kids here. I got to go to this event. I got to do this. Not saying that's not a bad thing, but there's got to be balance. Then you have the other side of it where people just go home and they binge Netflix for like 5 hours, right? They get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, come into work, do it all over again every week, party, get drunk on the weekends. And I'm not calling you out for being a bad person for doing that, right? We all have those times in our lives. I did. But eventually, as a man, you realize a lot of these things that are meant to keep you held is for a reason, right? The world wants to keep you where you are as a man, because if you are a man who thinks for himself, who acts and stands for truth and justice and righteousness, you're a threat to the evil forces of the world. And the issue that's really plaguing us today is we're turning bad things good, right? The norm, the narrative. There's a reason why politics and the media and music and Hollywood and the workplace and all these different things, there's a reason why all of these establishments push a certain idea, right? This isn't right or left. This isn't, liberal, conservative. It's not any of that. People use those terms so that they can, it's easier. A lot of people have cognitive dissonance, which means they need to choose a side. If they can't choose a side, then they have cognitive dissonance, and so they're caught in this constant friction, and people can get really messed up in the head because they can't pick a side. So most people have to just pick one or the other. But if you know what you want, if you know exactly what you want in life, it's going to be tough, and it's going to get harder as time goes on, because the influence, the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, is slowly and slowly, and in some cases faster and faster, taking over society, the world as we know it. More countries, more cultures, everybody's kind of being, conformed, right? This one world order, so to speak. So you have to keep that in mind. As a man, if you want these things, like a lot of men, be honest right now, take a second, think about what you want. I find that a lot of men typically want to have a good woman, a good wife, who respects them, who is peaceful with them, who is nurturing, who is caring, right? The classic, kind of like a housewife, but really not so much. Like we again put people in these categories, and people look down on housewives. It's not that, but it's the character, it's the values, it's the whole person, right? What do you want? What do you desire? And most men, I believe, would choose that type of woman I just explained, right? Good with kids, wants to have kids. Most men want to have kids. I find that the men who don't are normally just making excuses because, they don't want the responsibility, and they're, kind of selfish because they don't want to spend too much money. But I do think that there is something to be said about guys who wait until later on in life to get married. Not saying the people who get married younger, it's a bad thing. If you're in a position, if you meet someone, by all means, do it. But a lot of men these days, again, going back to that blue pill Disney mentality, the first girl that shows them any sort of attention, the first girl that, says yes, the first girl that likes them, or halfway. A lot of these women, guys, if you notice, a lot of these guys with these women, they're total simps, right? They bend over backwards for their wife in unhealthy ways. You would never see this sort of behavior even from a submissive wife to her husband, right? A woman who fears, who actually fears her husband, is scared of him and just serves him out of fear of being beaten or abused or neglected or whatever it is not a good position. A lot of men are serving from this mindset of, if I make her unhappy, she's not gonna do XYZ. She's gonna leave with my kids. She's gonna leave with half my stuff. She's not gonna sleep with me. She's gonna hate me. She's gonna berate me. She's gonna ridicule me in front of people, right? All these different things. So keep this in mind. The way you escape this whole mentality, this whole thing, is by embracing pain. Every time I've embraced comfort, I've had periods in my life, guys, where I've, pushed myself and I've done hard things, and it always has a great reward, right? When I was younger, in my later teenage years, I was convinced, I was dead set, I'm going to join the military, I'm going to get through, I'm going to do this. I had all these goals, right? I'm going to go to school, I'm going to do these things. I know they're hard. I know my immediate family hasn't done them, but I'm gonna do them anyway because I want to, because it sounds hard. It sounds like there's something to be gained from it, and I did, and it was worth it. When I got into my closer to mid-20s, I started to get into a sort of comfort lifestyle, is the best way I know how to put it. I think for most of my life, and I'll make a video on this later, going into it deeper, but for most of my life, I was always pushing. And I got to a point where as soon as I found out just what a little bit of comfort looked like and I could take my foot off the brakes, I did that. And what happened is I went on the complete other end, and I went like full comfort and became really lazy and just not driven. And there was other things going on, right? I had to deal with a lot of things, personal things myself. But the issue is a lot of men stay stuck and they keep coping. A lot of men don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They give up. Instead of clawing forward and inching forward inch by inch, sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, but you got to keep pushing. You got to keep moving, because you got to fight for something. You got to find something to fight for. And fighting is going to involve pain, and pain is going to involve suffering, and sometimes it might be extended, but eventually you'll grow from it, you'll heal from it, and you'll learn a lot, right? That's where a lot of wisdom comes from, is suffering and pain, and realizing everything. It's not putting your head in the sand, right? But it's actually realizing, like, wait a minute, I need to understand everything that's gone on in my life. And you don't get lost in it, right? There's a word for it. I can't think of it at the moment, but it's when you illumine, I can't remember the word, but there's a word where you basically stay on it in an unhealthy way. You fixate on it. You let it consume you, right? So I would highly recommend, guys, again, this is just coming from me. This is coming from someone who's lived both sides of it, who's seen it, who's seen what's going on in the world. You guys know this, right? But I think it's good to have other guys talk about it. I know there's a lot of guys who are older who are talking about this stuff, and it's just not really the same at the end of the day, because a lot of guys are removed. Maybe they don't remember so much. And I think a lot of us are going through this journey, right? You guys might have become fully mature at 20, right? Some guys might not become fully mature until 45, but it's good to talk about these things. It's good to understand these things as we're going through them, because the second you think you know everything, the second you think you've reached 30 or 40 or 50 and you become the man or whatever, as soon as you start limiting yourself and putting these confinements on yourself is the day you stop growing, and the day you really stop becoming a man, because a man is always pushing, growing, suffering, figuring out what to do next. So guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. Love to hear from you guys. Go ahead and drop that like, hit the subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.